I don't mean to crush your dreams, but Darius Garland to Sacramento is highly unlikely. Danny Cunningham from the Locked On Cavaliers podcast will explain why. But could a Jarrett Allen to Sacramento trade be on the table? We discuss right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all offseason long. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And Darius Garland is one of the names being floated out there or rumored out there that the Sacramento Kings have interest in. I believe those rumors to be absolutely true. Why wouldn't the Sacramento Kings have interest in Darius Garland? Add him to the list of potential point guards that are out there. The Kings both desperately need a point guard and desperately need a new kind of young or prime piece to build around as the new number one guy here in Sacramento. Darius Garland checks those boxes, but in order to pull off a trade, you also have to understand the other side, where they're at, what they want, and what it would take not just to make a Darius Garland trade work, but also what it would take to convince the Cleveland Cavaliers to move on from Garland and put them in ultimately a better position they feel to compete for a championship. That's why I had to have Danny Cunningham from the Locked On Cavaliers podcast here on Locked On Kings to talk about that circumstance. I'm not going to beat around the bush, and I'm not going to lie to you. If you are very hopeful about a Darius Garland trade, I'm not saying it's impossible, but as Danny and I are going to lay out, it's very, very unlikely. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But Danny brings a different kind of trade to the table, a trade that would bring rim protection, finally, and some wing depth to Sacramento. Danny and I share it all for you here on this conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Continuing on with our series of trying to find ways for the Sacramento Kings to make big swing improvements this offseason, as Scott Perry, new Kings GM, has his eyes around the league. And a team I think he should be keeping tabs on is over in Cleveland. The Cavaliers had an unbelievable season, but ultimately the Pacers are in the NBA Finals right now. The Cavaliers are not. The Cavs are trying to figure out how to get there. I don't know if there's anybody or many people on the Kings roster, players on the Kings roster that the Cavs feel could help them get there, but maybe there's some players that they feel they need to move on from. Is Darius Garland potentially that player? Garland is a name floated around that the Kings have interest in. So Danny Cunningham from Locked On Cavaliers joins me here on Locked On Kings to talk about the potential availability of Darius Garland. And Danny whispered a little note in my ear here before we started recording about a potential high interest in Jonas Valanciunas in Cleveland. So we'll touch on that as well. Danny, congrats just on a phenomenal season, my guy. I mean, that had been a ton of fun to cover, to ride out. I know the Cavs are hungry to build off of it. Meanwhile, here in Sacramento, they're hitting reset without hitting reset. So we'll see how that goes.
I thought I was just here to talk about how the Kings went 2-0 against the Cavs this year.
You know, we were the kryptonite. We were the kryptonite.
There were two teams that swept the Cavs this year in the regular season, and the Kings were one of them.
Hey, we'll take it. Put it on a banner. We will swept the Cavs in 2025. We will put that up in the Golden One Center somewhere. God knows we have a lot of space up there. Danny, how available is Darius Garland? Do you think that, I mean, I know he dealt with some injury issues. Obviously, the ball is in Donovan Mitchell's hands so much. Is Darius Garland available, or do you think this is just the posturing of teams who see his value, need a point guard, are like, hey, maybe we can snatch him from that very, very talented Cavs squad?
So I think it would be unfair to say that he's untouchable because I don't think that's true, but I also don't think that the Cavs are in a position where they're actively looking to trade Darius Garland. This doesn't mean Darius does not get traded this summer, but I think it means that if the Cavs are going to trade Darius Garland this summer, it would take a lot for them to feel as if that move makes sense for them. I don't think that they want to trade Darius Garland. I think that they believe still that Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, and Evan Mobley, that triumvirate can be an NBA championship caliber big three, if you will. And I also think too, the fact that you just mentioned that he was fighting through some injuries in the postseason, which was, I do think, a significant factor in their loss to the Indiana Pacers. But he also just had surgery earlier this week, and he's going to be out for 4 to 5 months. I think if the Cavs were maybe more interested in trading Garland, which again, I don't have reason to believe that they're super interested in dealing him. But if they were, I do think that surgery that maybe is going to cost him some of next season, because if you start looking at that timeline, 4 months from surgery, which was this past Monday, puts you at 2 weeks into training camp. 5 months from surgery puts you 3 weeks into the season. So I don't think it's crazy to think he might not be available, and you don't know what he's going to look like when he does get back from the surgery. But it also, I do think, takes a little bit of the value away from him. So I think that the Cavs at this point, there's more value, in my opinion, in them keeping Darius Garland than there is in trying to look for trades for him. Now, that said, I also don't think they should be in the position where if a team calls, they should not pick up the phone. Like, Kobe Altman should listen, but I think it would take a lot for him to act on an offer.
Yeah. When it came to the injury news or the surgery news specifically, and the fact that he was going to miss start of the season, I think a lot of people jumped on that as, oh, his value might be diminished now. I don't think it is. I think you trade for Darius Garland knowing full well he will be fine. He's going to recover. You just kind of bite the bullet for the first however much time he misses to start the season. I know he misses training camp, which is difficult as a point guard, but you kind of bite that bullet. So I wouldn't expect in any kind of Kings conversation for Garland's value to be any less because of that surgery that he's having. When I was thinking about like the concept of trading Garland in Cleveland, the question I couldn't personally get past is why? Like, just why do the Cavs feel like that is the position they need to upgrade? And realistically, what do they feel that they could get from around the league that they move on from Garland for that further vaults them into a championship conversation? And then as I continue to kind of go down that rabbit hole in my brain, I realized like the Sacramento Kings don't really have anything of that. Like the Kings are not the team to trade a player to get the assets to vault them over. Like DeMar DeRozan's not doing that for you. Zach LaVine's not doing that for you. So not to crush the dreams of Kings fans who are tuning into this podcast hoping that Darius Garland could be a King. I think there absolutely is a world where the Kings would call and offer a hefty amount for Darius. I just don't know why the Cavs would ever do it.
I don't necessarily see a lot of guys on the Kings roster that they can trade for Darius Garland that make a lot of sense from a Cleveland perspective. You bring up Zach LaVine, and I think Zach is a very nice player, and he certainly had a couple of very good games against the Cavaliers this past season. I don't think that he is necessarily what the Cavs need, and he also makes $47 million. And part of the thing, and part of the reason, I guess, the rationale behind entertaining Darius Garland trades is the Cavs are about to enter the second apron. And this is sort of serving as their last opportunity to make the tweaks to their roster that they do think could potentially make them a championship team. Because listen, they won 64 games this year. The regular season was fantastic, but ultimately they lost in the second round, game 5 for the second consecutive year. I think those two playoff exits are very, very different between this season and the previous season, but it was ultimately on paper the same exact result. So if you are questioning whether or not this core can do it, this is sort of your last chance to make a significant move without having all of the restrictions that you might have. I think if they want to shake it up, now is the time to do it. I think shaking it up in some respects does make sense. Darius is just not the player that I would necessarily look to move. And we talked about Zach LaVine. Darius makes $39 million. And with the Cavs where they're at right now, because they are operating as a second apron team, they cannot take back a single dollar more in a trade than they send out. They also cannot aggregate players in a trade unless they get under the second apron. So as I look at this, And I say, okay, well, what if the Cavs wanted to trade Darius Garland and they want to attach somebody else there? Because you can do that. But if you do that, you must be out of the second apron, and then you are hard capped. And I think there are very few players out there that are worth those things happening for the Cavs, being hard capped, having to cut that much money. It makes this all very, very messy and complicated, in my opinion.
Yeah, it feels like the timing of this conversation is a year premature. And the reason I say that is because the biggest asset that the Sacramento Kings have to convince any team to move on from their starting point guard, essentially, because that's what the Kings are looking for. We've had conversations about Trae Young, conversations about LaMelo Ball, conversations about Ja Morant. Now we have Darius Garland. It's draft capital. If there's anything the Sacramento Kings finally have in abundance, it's draft capital. All their draft picks through like 2031, 2032. Plus, they have a Spurs first-round pick unprotected and a Timberwolves first-round pick unprotected. So the Kings have this treasure trove of draft assets. Right now, I don't know how much value that has in Cleveland. Well, Kings draft picks always have value around the league because there's a very good chance that they're going to be very, very good. But in Cleveland, the idea of swapping one of their starting caliber players in a championship window for future assets, that ain't the play right now. Right. So I just don't know how the Kings put anything on the table that goes beyond any sort of preliminary conversation.
I think it's a really difficult spot for the Kings to be in. Again, as I look up and down this roster, there are not guys that I think, because it's not as if the Kings are devoid of good players. They have some talented players, certainly, but I don't think the talented players that they have make a lot of sense in Cleveland. I saw that there was a 3-team trade floating around there that involved the Cavs, the Kings, and the Los Angeles Lakers a couple of days ago. And this is not like a real trade. It was made basically to generate interest on the internet, and people are just kind of engagement farming, if you will, on Instagram. Sure. And it included having Domantas Sabonis sent to Cleveland. And I'm like, I think Sabonis is a fantastic player. I don't know how many bigs that I think would be a worse fit alongside Evan Mobley, because you want Evan to have the basketball in his hands. Domantas, I think, needs to have the basketball in his hands offensively to be successful. That is just something I look at and say, these two teams, while they both have talented players, and of course the Cavs are in a different level of talent than the Kings are, but they don't match up for a star level trade, in my opinion. They might match up maybe in some other areas for trades, but I don't think they match up in a Darius Garland deal.
Like I said at the top of the show, today's episode of Locked On Kings is brought to you by GameTime. There is nothing like the NBA playoffs, the intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds, as we saw in Indiana last night in Game 3. It's the kind of atmosphere you must experience live. And this year's NBA Finals matchup, it's already delivering, right? If you want in, GameTime makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest of big games. Prices on the app actually drop the closer that you get to tip off, and with killer last minute deals, panoramic seat views, no surprise fees, GameTime is a total game changer. Whether you're looking for one of those hot tickets in OKC or Indiana to go watch the NBA Finals, or you're hunting for, now that the NFL schedule has dropped, looking for the biggest NFL games for your team, or maybe you're looking of taking a trip to watch some NFL games in a different city this year, you should be buying your NFL or NBA or MLB or any sporting event tickets on GameTime. But in addition to sporting events, GameTime has the best deals that you're going to find on concerts, on local theatrical productions, comedy shows, you name it, GameTime has it. And with the GameTime guarantee, you know that you're getting the best deal. If you find a better price in the same row and section, they'll credit you 110% of the difference. I'm talking great NFL tickets for as low as $100, thanks to exclusive discounts on GameTime right now that you can find to plan your NFL journey this upcoming season. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. GameTime. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Right before we started recording, Danny dropped a little nugget of, hey, this is a trade that I think could happen between the Kings and the Cavs, or at least a trade that I think both sides would have interest in, and it immediately piqued my interest. So, Danny, why don't you present it to the audience the same way you presented it to me?
So I am of the opinion that the move the Cavs should be looking to make this summer is trading Jarrett Allen. I have long said, maybe not long said, but since the season ended, I have been somebody, and locally they have called this group the Core Four. It's Donovan, it's Darius, it's Evan, and it is Jarrett Allen. I don't think that Jarrett Allen is a core piece. I think he is a very, very good high-level role player. I think there are a lot of teams that would be very happy to have Jarrett Allen, and they should be, because he is a borderline all-star type talent. But I look at this and say, you know what? I don't know that allocating $20 million a year, and a number that will go up when his new contract extension kicks in, not this upcoming season, but the year after, I don't know that it's worth for the Cavs to spend that amount of money on the center position. So one of the things that I am wondering is whether or not there is some sort of deal, and this would have to be broken up into two separate trades, because the Cavs are a second apron team, and as I mentioned with Garland, cannot aggregate salaries in a deal. But trading Jarrett Allen and Isaac Okoro for Malik Monk and Jonas Valanciunas, because I do think Valanciunas would be a guy that I look at, could be a good fit in Cleveland to be the starting center for the Cavs, play roughly 17 to 20 minutes a night. You get more Evan Mobley at center, where the Cavs have been excellent over the past couple of years. And you potentially repurpose Isaac Okoro and give him maybe a different role in Sacramento that he could be better off in than being the 10th or 11th guy in Cleveland. So that is the sort of deal that I look at and say, maybe that is one that makes more sense for both sides than a Darius Garland trade.
My gut reaction when Danny presented that to me was, yes, I would do it. And I think the most painful part of that deal for Kings fans is the departure of Malik Monk. But you have to understand what you're getting back is, one, a center or a big that protects the rim, which the Kings desperately, desperately need and have been looking for a long time. Jarrett Allen has been a player that is just like, man, if only the Kings had Jarrett Allen. How many times have we said that over the last handful of years? So you get that. Isaac Okoro, maybe a little more on the project side of things, but wing depth, perimeter defensive depth, somebody that I think would fit a new Doug Christie system very, very well. I mean, I don't think the Kings would have any interest at all in moving on from Jonas Valanciunas as long as the price is right. I think the price is right here. I don't know. Like this is one of those deals, Danny, where maybe it doesn't feel like the big swing move that some Kings fans are hoping for. Maybe the Kings front office is looking for, but you're talking about a move that addresses depth, addresses needs, and at least gives you a foundation or a core that Perry can build with or build around going forward. Not that Isaac Okoro and Jarrett Allen are going to be your number one or number two or at any period of time on a successful team. But that to me is the starting point. And that to me is something that I think Sacramento would have interested in or should absolutely consider. There are question marks about how Jarrett Allen and Domantas Sabonis would coexist together. But God, I would have a hard time. I don't know how much better you could possibly hope to get for either Malik Monk or Jonas Valanciunas than that you presented right there.
Right. And I do think part of the complication from the Cavs side with any trade that they're going to make involving Darius or Jarrett Allen is I don't know that they're going to be in a position where they're going to get 1-for-1 talent. And I think that trading Garland right now, you're probably going to get 75 cents on the dollar for him. And maybe with Jarrett Allen, because he makes less money and is not as good of a basketball player as Darius Garland, you can get like 85 or 90 cents on the dollar for him. And I think that the Cavs are in a position where if they make this trade where maybe they don't get back equal talent for what Jarrett Allen and Isaac Okoro are, but they get back guys that change how this team looks, that changes the feel of this team, that makes them just, they can present themselves a little bit differently. And Malik Monk could potentially be a little bit of insurance too, should Ty Jerome walk in free agency for the Cavs, which is one of the biggest questions that they have this offseason, whether or not they're going to be able to pay him. So I do think that this is sort of a way for Cleveland to diversify what they look like. And also Sacramento, I think, in my opinion, at least, gets the best player in this deal in Jarrett Allen.
Locked On Kings is also brought to you by Wayfair. There's nothing like stepping into your own outdoor space and feeling like you've escaped to a personal oasis. If you're wanting to update your patio this season, Wayfair has made it easy to turn that space into, it feels like your own personal resort, comfortable, stylish, and ready for summer. Wayfair has everything that you need to level up that outdoor space, from conversion sets, outdoor bars, fire pits, hot tubs, gazebos, and yes, even the perfect string lights to match that summertime vibe. Get that resort feel without paying the resort price tag. You will find a vast selection of different things for you. And the best part, delivery is fast, free, and totally hassle-free, right? Say you got a big patio set, you got a bunch of outdoor chairs, you got a new dining table for the outdoors, right? That's heavy stuff. It's hard to ship. Nope, they bring it to you. They set it up for you. They handle it all. So if you're hosting friends or unwinding with a book outside, it genuinely feels like your own private retreat. Don't wait. Make your outdoor space your dream oasis today with Wayfair and enjoy it all summertime long. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop a huge outdoor selection. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Kind of a more obscure question for you as we get away from the trade conversation, because this is something I'm very curious of your perspective on before we wrap up. When LeBron left Cleveland for the second time, it was another organizational reset. It was certainly less of a messy departure than the first time and taking his talents to South Beach and
a little bit
the burning of jerseys and everything like that. But the organization had to reset. It's not close to an identical comparison in Sacramento with the departure of De'Aaron Fox, which was a messy departure. And this organization is in a state of limbo. But here the Cleveland Cavaliers are, and they've managed to build themselves into one of the best teams, if not the best team in the NBA record-wise last season, and a title contender. They were able to do that and build that without just relying on free agency or any of these shortcuts that other major markets like LA markets and stuff like that get. So your perspective, your limited perspective on Sacramento, what's going on in Sacramento, like what lessons do you think Sacramento can draw from what Cleveland did and how the Cavs were able to move on from their star, but build themselves and acquire Donovan Mitchell and mold themselves into this title contender they are today?
So it's funny because that reset sort of started before LeBron actually left. I mean, we think of the second LeBron era as a bunch of finals runs, and it was for 4 straight years. But if you can hop in the time machine and go back to the 2017, 2018, really the 2018 trade deadline, I think there was some push from LeBron and his camp to trade the Brooklyn Nets first round pick that they got from Boston in the Kyrie Irving trade. And that pick was the Cavs anticipated it being when they made the Kyrie Irving trade, thanks in large part to Kenny Atkinson, actually, and the job he did at that time as head coach of the Brooklyn Nets. But instead of that pick being a top 3 pick, it ended up being the number 8 overall pick. And the Cavs made the wrong selection there because they did not select Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They took Colin Sexton, but down the road, Colin Sexton turned into Donovan Mitchell. And from that point on, the Cavs were in a position that the Kings really have not been in because they were really bad. They won 19 games, and then they won 19 games, and then they won 22 games. But while they did that, they nailed their draft picks for the most part because they selected Colin Sexton, who is a good NBA basketball player. For the 8th overall pick, you could do a lot worse than what they did. It's just that an MVP in that draft went number 11, and that is kind of the only regret there. But then the next year, they drafted Darius Garland 5th overall, which is why you and I are having a podcast today because he's a 2-time All-Star, 25 years old. They drafted Isaac Okoro at 5th overall, which that is the one that if you were the Cavs, you would like to have back because there were a lot of guys, Tyrese Halliburton, Aaron Nesmith, Devin Vassell that went after him in that draft that I think would be awesome in Cleveland because they're awesome basketball players. And then they drafted Evan Mobley 3rd overall the next year. And that is when things really changed around because they found 2 all-stars in the draft. And you really, really have to do that. They found 2 all-stars, one of which has already been Defensive Player of the Year and 2nd team All-NBA by his 4th season in the league. So that matters a ton. Like they have organically found stars, and then they, at the right time, because after drafting Evan Mobley, they went from 22 wins the year before they drafted Evan to 44 wins his rookie season. They lost in the play-in, but it was just such a monumental shift in what they were organizationally. And that's when they said, okay, it's time for us to make the splash. And they traded for Donovan Mitchell. And since then, maybe they haven't been a championship contender all 3 years, but they've been a very, very good, consistent playoff team all 3 years. And that's kind of how this was built. So if you're Sacramento, and it's different now because the lottery rules have changed, but you almost have to be that. Like the Kings are in a situation where, and I understand that going to the playoffs for the first time in forever for the Kings was a really big deal. And that 48 win team back in 2023 was awesome. And I felt should have won that series against the Golden State Warriors, but they've just kind of been in the middle. They've won between 25 and 48 games every single year since 2012. That's a really long time to be in the middle. And that's the worst place to be in the NBA right now.
Purgatory, baby. NBA purgatory.
That's what they are.
Welcome to the Kings.
And I mean, the Cavs went from, when you have LeBron, and the Kings have never had somebody like LeBron, so it's different. But they went from a 50-win team every single year plus championship contender to we are going to be one of the worst teams in the league for 4 years. And those dividends are paying off now.
So I hear what you're saying. Been saying a lot of the same things on Locked On Kings. Let me ask you this. The Kings still feel that they are in a position, and maybe they feel they have to be because of the contracts of Domantas Sabonis and Zach LaVine and how almost impossible those are going to be to move. Big swing now to try one more time versus, hey, blow it up and embrace the tank. Like if you were leaning a direction in Sacramento, which route would you take?
I would, and it makes sense as to what's available. And like, this is the lamest example to bring up possibly because it worked out to absolute perfection. But if there's a trade out there where you can make a deal for somebody like Paul George, where he was traded from the Pacers to the Thunder and it didn't last very long, but that deal didn't bring them a championship at that point, but I think it's going to bring them a championship now. Like I know they're down 2-1 in the series as we record this, but I think they're going to win the series against the Pacers.
I agree.
They won that championship in part because they made a splashy move that they could pivot off of 18 or 36 months later, however long he actually spent in the state of Oklahoma. That is, if that sort of move is available, you do it knowing what your contingency plan is. But if it's not, I don't see the reason necessarily in just continuing to be in the middle. DeMar DeRozan, I think, is a very nice player. Zach LaVine is a very nice player. Those guys played for the Chicago Bulls. And I think a lot of the way I feel about the Sacramento Kings is exactly how I feel about the Chicago Bulls. It feels like these two franchises are the same exact thing right now. One of them's in California. One of them's in Illinois. They have different colors, but other than that, they're the same.
Well, Danny, you might have crushed the hopes of some Kings fans who are wanting to see Darius Garland in Kings purple, but you may have also reignited some hopes of Jarrett Allen or another potential deal between these two teams. I appreciate you taking the time, my man. Enjoy this offseason, get some rest, and get ready for what I'm sure is going to be another chaotic, exciting, all-in type Cavaliers season over there in Cleveland. Maybe the Kings will sweep you again.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Hope it's not too warm in basketball hell.